folks. Good evening. Welcome to the first baseball babble of 2025. Hard to believe I can say it's 2025. It seems like it was 2000 yesterday. Um, Orioles split with Toronto. And for those of you in the Baltimore area, I don't know if anybody's going to the opening day tomorrow. The game's been moved back by a half hour. Start time was 3:05, and now it's 2:35 because of potential inclement weather. Other than that, don't forget we have a Zoom call on Wednesday, April 2nd. David Stinson will be hosting that because I will be en route to visit my mom in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And for anybody who still wants to submit an article for our chapter newsletter, please get it to our editor, Ruth Sadler, by April 1st, if possible. So, nothing else really to report. Vince, he'll have to pronounce his last name. I'm pretty good with Italian names.
Guerrieri. Yes.
Guerrieri? All right. My grandmother was a Marino, so I'm pretty good. He's joining us from Ohio, and he's going to do his presentation tonight. As always, since we're on the SABR National account, this is being recorded, so it'll be up on YouTube in the very near future. So Vince, take it away, and then we'll get back to you afterwards with Q&A.
Great. That sounds perfect. My name is Vince Guerrieri. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Jack Graney SABR chapter here in Cleveland. And last year was the 50th anniversary of the infamous 10-cent beer night at Cleveland Stadium. And I work for a local newspaper, but I freelance for a lot of publications regionally and nationally. And so I wrote a 50th anniversary story for Cleveland Magazine, and I have just included that in the chat for you to peruse while I'm giving the presentation or at your leisure. And I was able to turn that into a presentation, which I've given at a variety of locales in Northeast Ohio. Gave it at the SABR conference last year in Minneapolis, and I will be and I have given it at a variety of SABR meetings virtually. So this is the most recent. I'm going to be sharing the presentation with you. It is a PowerPoint. And like you said, we'll try and answer everybody's questions at the end, if that is amenable to you. So the presentation is 10-cent beer night, a date which will live in infamy. And we're going to start with the words of John Adams, who was the guy with the drum. If you've ever been to Cleveland Stadium or Jacobs/Progressive Field, you've seen him. Even if you haven't, you've probably heard him. Because he comes through loud and clear on ball games. Unfortunately, he left us a couple of years ago, but he was a 10-cent beer night. He went to Indians and Guardians games for years and years and years. And he said, down through the years, 720,000 people have told me they were at 10-cent beer night. He said, and 820,000 people told him they were at Len Barker's perfect game. We're going to go back a little farther than that. The Indians won the World Series in 1948. They won a pennant in 1954 as well. Unfortunately, right in between, the Yankees had reached full dominance and won an unprecedented 5 straight World Series. The Indians were never too far back. They had the misfortune of putting together a team for the ages right as the Yankees were putting together an even better team for the ages. So, you know, they had a lot of really good years in the late 40s and early 50s, but unfortunately, most of them weren't quite good enough. But then, you know, their fortunes declined precipitously. In the late 1950s, they brought on some personnel that made some terrible, terrible decisions. The team was always fairly cash-strapped, even by the standards of the day. Interest got kind of indifferent. The team was linked to Minneapolis in the 1950s. Obviously, the The Giants considered that move as well before the Washington Senators ultimately moved there and became the Twins. The Indians were also linked to Seattle in the 1960s. That deal fell apart when the Indians were able to reach a better lease deal on Cleveland Municipal Stadium. That's what this picture here is from. The guy with the glasses talking is the mayor of Cleveland at the time, Ralph Locher. And the guy at the far right is Vernon Stouffer, the owner of the team at the time.
Vince, just to let you know, we can't see your shared screen.
Can't? Is it just me talking?
It's just you for now.
Okay. Let me try this again. How's that? There we go.
There you go.
All right. You
Thank
think I
you.
know what? You think I got this? You think I've done this before, right? All right. Well, we'll try this one more time. But all right. That's the title screen for 10 Cent Beer Night. That's John Adams doing his thing in the bleachers at Cleveland Stadium, where home plate was a rumor. This photo is actually of the Indians. They had a ceremony in 1949 when they were mathematically eliminated. And Bill Veeck, the owner of the team at the time, drove a horse-drawn hearse out onto the field. They lowered the pennant and they buried it in the outfield. That has been the subject of some speculation to this day because the pennant has never been found, but we know it's been dug up. And the reason we know it's been dug up is because the groundskeeper said many years later that they had to dig it up because Bill Veeck borrowed the casket they buried the pennant in from a local funeral home, and they wanted it back. Like I said, they were lean times for the Indians in the 50s and 60s. The guy in the glasses is Mayor Ralph Locher. The guy to his right is Vernon Stouffer, the owner of the Indians, who he of the microwave pizzas and macaroni and cheese. But they were seriously considering a move to Seattle in the 1960s. The deal fell apart for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that Sick's Stadium was nowhere near the kind of facility that they needed for a major league team, which we saw play out when the Pilots were an expansion team. That was one of the problems they had to deal with in their only year in Seattle. 1964, the Cleveland Browns won the NFL title. They played a total of 9 home games. That includes the NFL championship game. And they actually outdrew the Indians that year. It got to the point where the business community and Chamber of Commerce publications was encouraging people to buy tickets and attend games, viewing the team as a civic asset. But, you know, the team didn't really go anywhere and people didn't go to the games. 1973, they had an opening day and everything just came together. It was a Saturday. It was a beautiful day, and they ended up getting about 73,000 people at the ball game, and that was more than 10% of the season attendance that year. It got to the point where the Indians had a deal in place to play a certain number of home games at the new domed stadium that was under construction in New Orleans. The Indians weren't putting a real good team on the field, so they had to get really creative when it came to promotions at the ballpark. Carl Wallenda strung a tightrope across the roof of Cleveland Stadium and walked across it. Actually, he did that the week before 10 Cent Beer Night. And boy, just thinking about that makes me want to go lie down on the floor. Evel Knievel made an appearance. This was from another appearance in Ohio. He didn't actually jump anything while he was at Cleveland Stadium. But Milt Wilcox, who was a pitcher for the Indians in 1974, actually one of the pitchers who got on the field during 10 Cent Beer Night, he said, yeah, Evel Knievel had so many broken bones that he couldn't kickstart his motorcycle by himself, and I had to help him. The King and His Court softball exhibition played that year. They were actually there the night Dick Bosman threw his no-hitter, and Dick Bosman said, I was kind of disappointed that I had to answer questions from reporters because I wanted to go see the King and His Court. My favorite promotion that the Indians had at that point is one Mother's Day. Everybody got a free can of Right Guard deodorant. A functional present, but maybe not the best idea. And of course, there were beer nights. There were 4 scheduled for 1974. And if there's one thing I want you all to take away from this, it's that beer night was a popular promotion, not just in Cleveland, but throughout the major leagues. There were many, many teams that had some variation of the nickel beer night or the 10-cent beer night. And most of them happened without incidents. And of course, this is part of the long-standing relationship that baseball had with beer, going back to the 1800s when the American Association was called the Beer and Whiskey League. There was a guy by the name of Harry Stevens. Those of you who are old enough to remember, even into like the 90s, there were a lot of ballparks that the company that was named for him still handled concessions. But he standardized the ballpark menu: hot dogs, ice cream, pop, beer, peanuts, and popcorn. In fact, when he died, somebody said that Harry Stevens was the only man to parlay a bag of peanuts into $1 million fortune. In the 1940s, Bill Veeck owned the Milwaukee Brewers of the American Association, and he told a great story in his book, The Hustler's Handbook. He made a deal with Miller Brewing for beer for the ballpark, and Miller at that point was not a big company. They were running a distant third to Schlitz and Blatz, and you can see here Bill Veeck is obviously doing ads for Blatz, but he made the deal, and they said, and it was during the war, and one of the things that they had in the war was grain rationing. So all of a sudden, beer got to be in short supply, and people were coming to the ballpark just for the beer. And Miller said, do we have to make the beer for you or just supply it? And Bill Veeck said, oh, you can only supply it if that's too much of a hardship. And he said the following year we got a whole bunch of fly-by-night breweries, and I'm sure after the war every one of them went back to making shampoo. Veeck owned the Cleveland Indians in the late 40s, sold that team to pay for his divorce, owned the St. Louis Browns in the 50s, and actually he engaged in a fairly pitched battle with the Cardinals over which team would remain in St. Louis. The Cardinals ended up winning, obviously, because they got bought by Anheuser-Busch, who had far deeper pockets than Bill Veeck could ever come up with. But he said he sold them Sportsman's Park for $1 million and all the repairs they could find. And the Busch family said, we want to rename the park Budweiser Stadium. And he said, you can't name the stadium Budweiser Stadium. You can't name it after a product. And he said, well, what about places like Wrigley Field? And they said, okay, that's named for the family. And he said, okay, we're going to name our stadium Busch Stadium. And sure enough, a couple of years later, that's when Anheuser-Busch came out with Busch beer. So beer has always been a very significant portion of the baseball experience. Now we're gonna I'm gonna take the slideshow off for a second because I want to show you a little video to go with the ambiance. This is the game that was a week before the Indians and Rangers played on 10-cent beer night. It was the Indians and the Rangers in Texas, and Gaylord Perry was the ace of the Indian staff, and he had won the night before, and he had Lenny Randle had popped off in a newspaper and said he wouldn't be anything were it not for the spitter. And Gaylord Perry told Milt Wilcox, if I was pitching tonight, Lenny Randle would go down every time he came to bat. I wouldn't hit him, but I'd knock him down. And this is what happened then. And this is Randle up to bat. And that's him just knocking Milt Wilcox ass over tea kettle. And a fight broke out. And it was, by all accounts, a real fight. If you're a baseball fan, you know that some fights there's some jawing, there's a couple of haymakers that get thrown, but this was actually there was actually a certain amount of ill will. People were, players were actually throwing punches. My favorite story is that Buddy Bell squared up against Billy Martin, who was the manager of the Rangers at the time. This is Dave Duncan going into the stands because somebody threw a beer at him. But Buddy Bell said he was ready to square up against Billy Martin. Billy Martin, who had actually played with Buddy Bell's father, Gus, said, I can't hit you. But following that game, Billy Martin who was asked if he was worried about reprisals after the game, and he said, and I quote, Cleveland does not have enough fans for us to worry about. And Billy Martin was really good at using that line to use that line from Branch Rickey, taking an impossible situation and instantly making it worse. And that's Pete Franklin. And Pete Franklin was kind of the proto sports talk host. I feel like every hot take artist today owes a debt of gratitude to Pete Franklin. And you can infer from that what you will. His autobiography was called You Could Argue, But You'd Be Wrong. He was the guy who started suggesting, I hate the Yankees, Hankies. Had a wonderful ongoing feud with Ted Stepien, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, to the point where he called into a show that Stepien was on and said, am I talking to the dumbest man in pro sports? So there was definitely a lot of people fanning the flames about the following week's Indians-Rangers game in Cleveland, but Pete Franklin was definitely among the loudest voices. I want to take a minute and talk about the Texas Rangers. And they started out as the second Washington Senators. I mentioned that the first Washington Senators went to Minneapolis and became the Twins. They got another team in Washington very quickly after that because Major League Baseball realized it was in everybody's best interest to have a team in Washington because congressmen like to go to the games and be seen at the games. And if they were at the games, then they wouldn't start investigating baseball's antitrust exemption. The Senators ended up getting bought by Bob Short, who had no connection to the Washington area or really the Dallas area either. But he saw dollar signs and he moved the team to Dallas. That was met with some misfortune or some displeasure from Senators fans. And in fact, the Senators ended up forfeiting their final game at RFK Stadium because there were too many fans on the field. There were actually 3 great forfeits in the 1970s due to fan interference. And we'll talk about all 3 of them tonight. Obviously, the primary one we're going to talk about is 10-cent beer night, but we're going to touch on all 3. So the the Senators forfeited their last game as the Senators, moved to Texas. The Rangers at that point were almost as bad as the Indians, and they had a really interesting succession of managers. Ted Williams was hired to manage the Senators, actually won Manager of the Year his first year there. But by the time they moved to Texas, he was kind of checked out. And the Rangers were able to hire Whitey Herzog, and Herzog had been a coach, or I think in the minor leagues for the Mets, and he had gotten passed over after Gil Hodges died. Hodges was actually a former Senators manager himself, but he got passed over when Gil Hodges died. Yogi Berra became the Mets manager, and Whitey Herzog became the Rangers manager. Bob Short had said that I would fire my grandmother if I had a chance to hire Billy Martin, and lo and behold, Billy Martin became available. Martin had moved into Major League Managing in 1969, started out with the Twins, won a division title there, wore out his welcome and got fired. Went to the Tigers, won a division title there, wore out his welcome and got fired. And Bob Short, of course, greeted him with open arms. And Billy Martin would subsequently wear out his welcome in Texas and get fired. He didn't win a division title there, but he did actually end up winning American League Manager of the Year at one point. So we are looking at a full-on recipe for disaster for when the Indians and the Rangers met on June 4th, 1974. It was a game against a rival who had some bad blood between the two teams. It was a full moon, if you're one of those people that believes in that kind of thing. It was the beginning of June, so school had just let out for the year. And of course, beer was 10 cents a cup. Mike Shropshire, who wrote The Seasons in Hell about those early Rangers teams, said it was alcohol, adrenaline, and testosterone. And he described an ambiance where people were drunk on the train on the way down to the stadium. And in fact, he was hardly alone in that. I had a couple of people, at least one umpire and at least one player, tell me they got a contact buzz at the stadium that night because there was plenty of illicit substances to go around. Things started out relatively innocuously. There was some streaking because it was the 70s, and I guess that's what they did. There were all kinds of people running around on the field in the outfield between innings. There was a father and son that ran out to second base and mooned the crowd. There was a woman who jumped down onto the field and tried to kiss one of the umpires. But the crowd got drunker and rowdier. It got to the point where you were starting to see fireworks getting thrown from the stands. There were the players couldn't warm up on the warm-up mounds, which were right next to the dugouts. If they were warming up, they had to go out onto the pitching mound and warm up. They were pulling the pitchers in from the bullpens. Players' wives and girlfriends were taken out of the main seating bowl in the sixth. Mike Hargrove famously told the story. He was actually a rookie with the Rangers at the time, but he was playing first base, and he said, I saw a jug of Thunderbird wine get thrown at me. And I kicked it over with the hopes that the grounds crew would pick it up. And somebody in the stands picked it up, and that's when I really started to get worried because I was afraid I was going to see it again. And it was actually it turned into a really good game. The Rangers got up early on the Indians. The Indians kind of chipped away at their lead, and it was 5-3 in the bottom of the ninth. Manager Ken Aspermani sent up 3 straight pinch hitters, all of whom got hits. And the next thing you know, the game is tied at 5. And more than a few people told me that the Indians were on the verge of winning that game when a fan hopped down and tried to take Jeff Burrows' cap in right field. Jeff Burrows fell down, the fan fell down. The field was crowned, so all Billy Martin could see was them falling down, but his inclination was that somebody was trying to assault his right fielder. And he led what was referred to by several people to me as the charge of the Light Brigade. He pulled a bat from the bat rack and said, we got to go out and help our guy. Now, a couple of other people had suggested to me that Billy Martin did this because he knew the Rangers were on the verge of losing the game. And, this could at least lead to a delay, if not an outright forfeit. And Martin, by all accounts, was described to me as a fairly smart manager, so I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility. But the upshot is he and his players ran out onto the field to defend Jeff Burrows, at which point Ken Aspermani said, this could start a real fight. We have to go out and help him. Ken Aspermani said, I figured that my 25 and his 25 could handle anything that was coming. And then before too long, everybody ended up on the field. Fans were streaming onto the field. The players, kind of found their way off the field very carefully and ended up in the clubhouse. And they said, oh, yeah, you could just hear it roaring for the next hour or so. I mean, before they could even try to get any order. I actually talked to a Cleveland police officer who said he was out on the east side and they got a call and they said, all units proceed to Cleveland Stadium. There's a riot in progress, and he wasn't sure what to expect because Cleveland in the 60s and 70s was kind of a scary place. They had race riots in the Huff in 66. They had a shootout in Glenville in 68. There was going to be, they were in the early stages of a very violent mob war in the 70s. And so the police officer says, we got off the shoreway and we're heading down to the stadium. And he said, and 2 naked women ran out in front of my car. And he said, oh, I guess it's going to be that kind of riot tonight. The reaction was, of course, as expected. The game was called as a forfeit. Wayne Minshew of the Atlanta Constitution said how utterly stupid, how insane, how disgusting. Dave Anderson of the New York Times said it was the beer that made Cleveland infamous. And Dick Young of the New York Daily News said crowds go there to tank up, not to watch baseball. What do the lords of baseball expect? The guy in this picture is Ted Bonda. He was the owner of the Indians, and he viewed the evening as a success because they got twice the normal Tuesday night crowd. And in fact, he asked Major League Baseball to have the remainder of the 10-cent beer night promotions. And of course, Major League Baseball said, "What are you, nuts? We're never doing that again." I'm just kidding. They had another one a month later. But they had learned their lesson. They tripled security, and only the first two beers were 10 cents. Following that, they were full price, which at the time was 65 cents if that's what you're interested in. And it was actually an even bigger crowd. The Athletics came into town. This was the game the night before Dick Bosman's no-hitter. But it was a pitcher's duel between Catfish Hunter and Gaylord Perry. Catfish Hunter won. And this is the story from the next day's Cleveland Press. And I don't know if you can read the lead, but it says it was so quiet you could hear the foam breaking down in your cup. Now, I mentioned that there were three big forfeits. The third one, of course, was Disco Demolition Night. The promotion was you bring in a disco record, you get in for 98 cents, and they were going to gather them all up and put them in a box and blow them up between games of a doubleheader. 10-cent beer night in Cleveland, the crowd was estimated around 27,000 in a stadium built for 80,000. Disco Demolition Night, by contrast, the crowd was estimated from anywhere from 50,000 to 60,000 in a stadium that was built for about 55,000. It was said that the turnstile spun off because so many people got in. It was just one big fire hazard, and there were thousands more people outside. And now we will go to the videotape on this as well. I got a video of a news report from that day. And hang on one second. Wait a second. Where'd it go? You'd think I got this down by now, you know?
50,000 people, the largest crowd of the season, showed up at Chicago's Comiskey Park for the twilight doubleheader between the White Sox and the Detroit Tigers. 15,000 others had to be turned away. Many had come for Disco Demolition Night, a promotional gimmick. Between games, as planned, a huge box containing thousands of disco records was blown up. The rest was unplanned. Fans stormed out onto the field in the thousands. Disco records were hurled like frisbees. Bonfires were set. Bottles were thrown. The batting cage was torn down and destroyed. Fistfights broke out. White Sox players had to be locked in their clubhouse for their own protection. The melee lasted an hour and a half and resulted in 39 arrests and a few minor injuries. The baseball fans missed the second game. It was canceled. The White Sox lost it. It was forfeited to Detroit.
Now's the perfect time. Now, Milt Wilcox was supposed to pitch for the Tigers that night. He was playing for the Tigers at that point, and he was supposed to pitch for him. And he said he was warming up between the games, and he said, "I don't know what they used, but they used too much of it." And he said it was like a concussion. It almost knocked him down. But like Bruce Springsteen said, someday we will look back on this and it will all seem funny. And that was kind of the case with 10-cent beer night. The game started to take on an almost mythical significance. Like I said, John Adams said that 700,000 people told him they were at 10-cent beer night. Tim Russert actually was there. He of Meet the Press. He was I believe he was a law student at that point. His exact words were, "I went there with $2. You can do the math." Drew Carey said one of his friends was there and bragged about it for years, even though he ended up getting hit in the head with a beer bottle. And it got to the point where T-shirts started to get sold, like this one from Homage. And it's actually really interesting. I talked to the founder of Homage for the 10-cent beer night story, and he said we didn't have licenses to begin with, so we tried to sell products that we thought were kind of deep cuts that fans would recognize, and so they were able to sell things from 10-cent beer night or things from the Pine Tar game in New York, or the bean brawl between the Braves and the Cubs. And they've kind of turned that into a cottage industry. And that is but one of the weird moments in Cleveland sports from my book of the same name, published here in Cleveland by Gray Publishing. You can get it through their website, through the usual suspects like Barnes and Noble or Amazon, and wherever else fine works of literature may be sold. That is the extent of my presentation. I will happily take any questions that you might have.
Anybody questions? Raise your hand, put it in the chat. Vince and I officially met last year at the convention in Minneapolis
We did.
when Cleveland was playing at the Twins that weekend.
And I think we saw the only game in that series they lost.
Right.
No, I take that back. It was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They
Yeah, it
lost
was a 4-game
Thursday.
set.
Yeah, they lost Thursday and Friday, and then got it together.
The Cleveland manager got ejected that night. I do remember that.
Yes, I was at the game the night before Jose Ramirez clocked Tim Anderson, and Francona got thrown out of that game. And it was fantastic. I mean, and my favorite part is he's yelling at the ump, and the ump runs him, and he starts walking off, and then he's like James Brown performing an encore. He goes back and starts yelling at him again.
Jerry, go ahead.
One of our fellow members in the chapter, who I'm surprised is not here tonight, Tom Steek, who's an old Clevelander and is one of the people who says he was at the game, also told me that after the riot was finally calmed down in the stadium, it moved over to Public Square, I think it's called. Is that correct?
There is a Cleveland Public Square. I can't speak to that with any authority, but I feel like that's where, all the drunks who came down on the train, who were going back to catch the train, probably ended up there. And it wouldn't surprise me. Mike Hargrove said they were staying at I can't remember which hotel they were staying in downtown, but he said they'd said, do not leave your hotel until the bus gets here tomorrow.
I also, if I recall, the Indians had to go to the Rangers clubhouse and surround them on their way to the bus to protect them. Is that?
That one I can't vouch for, but I do know that they had to, that they definitely came out and, surrounded them and tried to make sure that they got into the clubhouse safely.
That was fun, by the way. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was obviously it was a lot of fun for me to research. There's an element of in a story like this, separating the wheat from the chaff, because there are so many stories that are out there, and probably about half of them are true. We got a question. Have they had any crazy events for the movie Major League? Honestly, I mean, very little of that movie was actually filmed in Cleveland. They filmed some establishing shots, like those opening credits. That was in Cleveland. I can actually tell you where in Cleveland a lot of that was. That was in Tremont, going down into the flats. They had the old Hewletts. But most of it was filmed in Milwaukee, which is apparent when you look at the scoreboard and you see the thing for the NBC affiliate, which is not the Cleveland NBC affiliate.
Anybody else? Questions? I know it's the first couple days of baseball, so we're all itching to go and watch some games or see what the scores are or whatnot. So,
Well, I am just delighted that the Guardians recovered today because I'm hoping it's just a short sample size, but their bullpen has been worrisome.
I have a buddy who's from Minneapolis who's been sending me messages. He's like, "We're 0-3 and it's not looking good." So who knows with this, like you said, small sample size.
Yes.
So the Orioles are opening tomorrow against Boston, so I will be there.
Yeah, the Indians or the Guardians. It's been 2 years. I still am not completely used to calling them the Guardians. And I actually talked to Tom Hamilton for a story for Ohio Magazine. And I said, do you do it? And he says, it took me a year. It took me a year to get fully used to calling them the Guardians. But
Yeah.
they're out of town. They're actually on the West Coast all week. Opening day is not Tuesday, but next Tuesday. And I feel like that is a function of weather in northern Ohio being so dodgy this time of year. I mean, it can be sunny and 65. It can be 35 and sleeting. It can be, anything in between.
Cleveland's here the week, I believe, right before Easter, so I'll probably go to a couple of those games. So, here in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys are pretty quiet tonight, so I, appreciate
I
everybody
like to
showing
think
up.
that's because my presentation was exhaustive.
It was. You wad the words right out of them. So there's nothing wrong with that. And we have our next one is Wednesday, April 2nd. Like I said, David Stinson will be hosting that one since I will be traveling. And Alan Gaff, I believe, will be talking about his book on Christy Mathewson, which is semi-appropriate because I'm going up into the Scranton area where Christy Mathewson was born in Wyoming County in Pennsylvania. If there's nothing else, I will let you guys get back to checking your scores and your fantasy teams and all that kind of stuff. Much appreciated. Thank you, Vince, for joining us from Ohio tonight.
My
And,
pleasure, and I hope to see some or all of you in Texas this summer.
Texas, end of June. I haven't booked mine yet, but I'm still leaning towards going. So a couple other dominoes have to line up first, but
I know Vince mentioned a wedding. I can't go to the convention because my nephew's getting married on that Friday.
That's my wife's brother is getting married the Friday before, the 21st.
Yeah, mine's right
I'm
in the
going,
middle.
yeah, I can fly to Texas from Boise.
yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I appreciate it. See you the next outing. And like I said, the Baltimore newsletter should be out within the next week or two once it's edited and ready to go. So be on the lookout, for that. You know how to reach me if you need anything. Much appreciated. And happy almost April. So have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.